Hi, I'm Barbara Lucas, and welcome to the Green Room, where we explore the environmental topics that green up our world. According to the National Climate Assessment, extreme precipitation events have increased by 37% in the Midwest since the 1950s. Although they can't prevent a flood, rain gardens can help deal with the deluge. Today's guests are Susan Bryan, Rain Garden Coordinator of the Washtenaw County Water Resources Commissioner's Office, and Roger Moon, Master Rain Gardener. Susan and Roger, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, before we get into what is a rain garden, I'd like to ask you, Susan, what happens in nature to rain?
Oh, yeah. A rain garden is really an imitation of nature. What nature already invented, we're just copying. In nature, usually in a forest or a prairie, the rain falls down and the plants help soak that water right into the ground. It never runs off. It doesn't go across the ground into the stream. It goes through the ground, so it soaks in and then through the groundwater and feeds the stream that way.
And I hear it kind of filters the problems before it hits the streams and lakes.
That's right. That's why groundwater is so clean. It's because it's been filtered through all those particles before it gets to a lake or a stream or to the groundwater underneath the ground.
And in urban areas, with the water that comes off our rooftops and our driveways and it hits the storm drains, does that get treated?
It is not treated at all. The water that hits a roof or a driveway goes straight into the gutter, into the storm grate, into a pipe, and goes straight into the river or into a creek.
And what's the connection with algal blooms?
Algal blooms are usually caused by increased phosphorus, and phosphorus comes from fertilizers that we put on our lawn, cow waste, agricultural activities, and even just it occurs naturally in the soil as well. So when that soil gets dislodged and washed into the gutter, or fertilizers from our lawn get washed into the gutter, go straight to the river and then to the next pond, and then you get an algal bloom and fish gills.
One thing that you mentioned earlier, which I thought was pretty neat, you mentioned that our report card as a community are the water bodies downstream from us.
That's right. Yep.
And what was our report card in the Ann Arbor area?
Well, our report card is Getty's Lake, and then Ford Lake, and ultimately Lake Erie. So even though Lake Erie was blamed on agricultural practices, we are upstream of Lake Erie. So all those problems that happened in Toledo, we are also a contributor. I mean, in our area, but everyone upstream of them.
So we've been talking about water quality, but there's also the property damage that water can cause, such as wet basements.
Sure.
And a lot of taxpayer money goes into creating infrastructure such as pervious pavements or detention ponds, things like that. But homeowners, like Roger Moon here, can do something else called rain gardens. And so let's talk about what is a rain garden.
A rain garden is just a garden that instead of being raised, it's depressed a little bit, not too much, just 3 inches, 6 inches. And then the water from your roof or your driveway can go into that garden, sit and soak in. And the plants help it soak in so it doesn't sit there too long. What does your rain garden do?
I have 3 of them, actually.
Wow.
Actually, I call 3.5 or 4. One of them was there all along, and I never considered it until I learned what a rain garden actually is. But in the gardens that I have, the rainwater comes right off the roof through a pipe feeds into the garden. And on a heavy storm, something I'd say over an inch of rain or so, there will be some puddling. Actually, the water does pool because the garden is recessed into the ground, which, allows the puddling. But 24 hours or less. In fact, that's our objective, is 24 hours or less, because we don't want these are not pools or ponds. We don't want to,
you don't want fish. Fish aren't the goal.
Fish,
right?
Yeah, or mosquitoes, I think, are probably the main
yeah.
concern for residents. So that's the biggest concern.
So yours soaks right in, even though you have clay soils on your property.
Yeah, it's very heavy clay. In fact, several times I've tried to drill holes in it, for post holes or things like that, and actually broken the auger doing it. But
Wow.
it's the USGS performed a 5-year scientific experiment in Wisconsin, and in 2010 they published their report, and they said native species plants with being very deep rooted penetrated the clay. So as a result of that report, it really gave us a lot of leeway. In the past, many people building rain gardens were bringing in what was called engineered soil, which is a perfect combination of organics and sand, clay, and other things. And it was a bit, large construction job to remove the offending
So they're
clay
saying
soil and then replace it. So
the
that's
plants can penetrate the clay, so maybe you don't need all those amendments?
exactly, that's it.
So that probably explains why you don't just make a depression and have turf grass or ground cover, because those roots aren't doing anything to help the water go down.
That's right. That's right. Grass, the roots are just as tall as the grass is, so they're only 2-3 inches deep. Whereas a native plant or even other perennials will have deep roots, and that'll penetrate the clay and let that water soak in. Also, mixing in compost can help. So just like you would with normal gardening, preparing the soil with some compost, mixing it in, then planting some plants, and even on clay, the rain gardens work fine.
I've heard
and
that,
we were talking about wet basements too, so we'll come back to that.
Sure. Yeah, I've heard that turf grass, if it's very tight, the water can just shed off of it, almost like pavement.
Yeah.
Which is amazing. Yeah, did you want to mention something about wet basements?
Well, when someone calls us and they have a wet basement, a rain garden can be one tool in the toolbox that they can use to fix the problem. First, though, we do a little analysis about how the water is getting into their basement. And the first question, is it rainwater or is it groundwater? So the way to tell that is to just ask, when it rains, do you get water in your basement? Or do you get water in your basement all the time? And if it is attached to a rain event, then it means that water is coming in through some way. The next step is to figure out what way. So sometimes that just takes going outside and when it's raining, or just take a hose and see where does the water go. And if it's going, for instance, one couple that I worked with, their whole backyard was sloping to their window well. And that was the low spot. So when it rained, water just poured in their window well. So the idea was to create a different low spot. So dig a hole, but don't just dig a hole, make a nice rain garden there, and it'll soak in that water.
Kind of reminds me of the house I lived in prior to the one I'm in now. We had water in our basement, and I went and looked outside, and it turned out the grade of the house was dipping down right next to the foundation.
Yeah.
So first we improved the grade to shed away from the foundation,
Right.
and then I dug a trench. Then I took some of those really long downspouts and attached them, because it turned out the downspouts were coming down right next to the foundation. So once I got those long downspouts out, then I dug a trench from the downspout to a low part of my yard.
Yeah.
And I did put some wet-loving plants there, but it really wasn't like a huge garden. It was sort of like I could ease into that year after year. The immediate thing was changing the grade and putting the downspouts down.
That's right. So you solved your problem by sloping the ground away from your house, but then making a path for the water to get to an existing low spot. And then you planted plants. So you planted a rain garden just using logic.
Yeah, it worked really well. I was really pleased.
Oh, good. Oh, another good point is that I visited some people that didn't have gutters. And so the water just fell down and created a trench right under their roof. And then they were getting water in their basement. Gutters are an important part. If the water isn't going away from the house, you need a gutter so you can control it and put it where you want it to put it.
Or French drains, I've heard, you can put in the ground underneath, but that's pretty complicated. But
And you can use a French drain to get the water where you need it to go, but to get the water to soak in and not become a problem for your neighbor, that sort of thing, then a rain garden is a good way to do that.
It's probably worth mentioning at this point, in addition, rain gardens, their job is to collect and absorb water. You don't want to do that right next to a foundation wall. Our rule that Susan has passed down to us is be at least 10 feet away, even more if you can, just because that water is going to go straight down. You don't want it to go the wrong way.
So what's the minimum size for a rain garden?
In Ann Arbor, you can get a credit for having a rain garden. You get a credit on your water bill. There's a line item for stormwater. And in order to get that credit, the rain garden has to be 130 square feet.
Wow.
Which sounds like a lot, but it's 13 by 10. It's not that big.
Okay.
And it could be 2 separate rain gardens.
Oh.
You know, so they're pretty small. And another thing is it has to capture the runoff from an area equal to half of your roof. So it doesn't have to be the roof itself. It could be a patio or something like that, but an area equal to half the roof. And you get a credit, so that's kind of nice. But in general, if you're figuring out, if you're not worrying about that and you want to size your rain garden, it's about 1/5 of the size of the roof or whatever impervious surface you're running off into the rain garden. So if you have a 1,000 square foot house and half of it's going to your rain garden, that's 500 square feet, then your rain garden would be 100 square feet.
Now, my rain garden is pretty small. The only drawback I see to having it pretty small is that I made the mistake of putting some pretty large, pretty tall plants in it.
Oh, yeah.
So my advice, if you're going to do a small rain garden, think about the height, because some of them are amazingly tall, those native plants. In the front, I did put like ferns and Canada anemone and things that are lower growing, which do you have some suggestions for some sort of medium height plants that would be good?
Sure. You're not alone in not liking plants that are too tall.
I mean, I like them, but when you have a very small garden, it's a little
overwhelming.
Yeah.
Yeah. When my colleagues Harry Sheehan and Shannon Gibb Randall started this program, 2 aspects they found really affected whether homeowners liked their rain gardens. One was, are the plants too tall? And the other one was if they liked grasses, ornamental grasses. So those are 2 things that you either like it or you don't, and there's no in between. But yeah, there's lots of even native plants that are medium sized. You have blue lobelia in your garden.
Yeah, blue lobelia, I love it. It's easy to grow and it's very colorful and it blooms for a long time, you know, from late July into the fall.
Yeah, blooming schedule is something else to think about, right? So that you want, I mean, ideally it'd be nice to have different plants bloom throughout the season.
You could pair those with black-eyed Susan. Then you'd have blue and yellow. That'd be pretty. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a question of what you think is too tall. One of my favorites is the scientific name is Echinacea, or coneflower. It looks kind of like a large daisy. I guess that's what you would say.
Purple coneflower.
Yeah, purple coneflower. I'm sorry. And they're yellow. They're yellow ones, and they're about 3 feet tall. I don't think that's excessive.
Yeah. Pollinators love those, right?
They do, they do. And when you plant native plants, you can get all sorts of beautiful butterflies, like swallowtails and monarchs. And oh, you know, another good rain garden plant is swamp milkweed.
Swamp milkweed.
And you can attract monarchs and have a good plant for a rain garden. Yeah.
Keeping in mind that I found out this past year that rabbits and groundhogs like them.
Swamp milkweed?
At least when they're seedlings.
Oh, I'm surprised.
Yeah.
And then in terms of in the winter, do you have to take everything out, all the, you know, the weeds, or can you, not the weeds, 'cause a weed is a plant out of place. I know it's a subjective term, but the dried stalks and seed heads, is it okay to leave those for the birds and the insects and such to winter over in the winter?
I leave mine. It's really a matter of taste. Some people like to have it totally clean at the end of the season. I like seeing, especially the standing grasses. Switchgrass is a beautiful native rain garden plant, and it looks so nice all through the winter. I mean, we have 6 months of winter. Having that as a backdrop, and then red twig dogwood in front is so pretty all winter. So that's kind of nice.
Yeah.
And then also I found, and I'm not an expert on wildlife, but that some swallowtail butterflies actually, their cocoons overwinter.
Oh.
So they need that standing dead to have their cocoons overwinter, and then they emerge in the spring.
Oh,
so
those are so beautiful too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So those are important. But some people like it neat and tidy at the end of the season. That's okay too.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the Washtenaw County programs. If you need some help with your rain garden, what can they provide?
Well, you can take the Master Rain Gardener class like Roger did. And actually, you had already built a rain garden. You can either, we have a list of certified contractors, and that's what you did first. You hired a contractor to build the first one.
Right, yeah. Yeah, the first garden I did was quite large, well over 300 square feet, and it was in clay on a slope. So I needed help with just the digging. But at that point, I was not aware of the county's program. And so I went online. I think I was looking at the Wisconsin Rain Garden book,
Right.
and I just followed their directions step by step. Which now, of course, our county has we have the same thing.
That's true.
And
We have one online on our
but I'd never
website.
done it before. I said, well, boy, is there some subtlety I'm missing? It's like if you're at home doing your own plumbing, you say, well, gee, I've got wrenches. Why can't I do it? If you've never done it before.
So how do people get to the rain garden website on Washtenaw County's website?
Oh, it's well, you can Google Washtenaw Rain Garden, and
Okay.
you come to our website, or ewashtenaw.org/raingardens, plural. And then you can see that we have a design assistant. So myself or one of the other staff members will come out and give you a little help on, okay, where in your yard should you put it? We'll even do plant suggestions. If you have a great site that a lot of people are going to walk by and it's going to be a really beautiful garden, then we'll even design it for you. But homeowners have to build it themselves. So, a shovel or backhoe or compost, mulch, all that kind of stuff, and then planting, they have to do themselves. And then we also, then we have the Master Rain Gardener class. And
How
that's-
many weeks is that?
It's 5, we teach it every winter.
Okay.
And it's 5 weeks, 5 mornings. So it's a big commitment, but we try to teach people everything we know about rain gardens so that they are equipped to design a rain garden for themselves and then for their friends too. You've designed for a couple other people at this point.
Yeah. Well, when I signed up for the Master Rain Garden course, they said, are you willing to offer assistance to others? And this is a nice thing. I have talked to a lot of my neighbors and other people that I've known, and I've helped them get started.
Which reminds me of those signs. Tell us about the signs.
So if you're walking around your neighborhood and you see a little rain garden sign, it means that those people built that rain garden themselves.
Great.
So they're going to know a lot about it. You can always ask your neighbors about the rain gardens. If you see someone with this t-shirt, Michigan Master Rain Gardener, that means they took the class and they know a lot about rain gardens.
Great.
Yeah, so there's a lot of people out there that can help.
But you
besides
don't
us.
have to take a class, and you don't need a backhoe. I mean,
You can do it with a shovel. Oh yeah, and you did it very easily in your yard.
Yeah, there's all different levels, ranging from people like me to people like Roger.
Right, and I built mine with a shovel. Like I didn't, and I'm on sand, so it's a little easier. But
Okay, great.
I built mine with a shovel, and it was just me. So
Well, we're out of time, but thank you so much for being here today. It's been really interesting. For an online archive of today's show, go to ewashtenaw.org/greenroom. Thanks for joining us here in the Green Room.